Now, the world's been waiting with a degree of trepidation for Donald Trump to make up his mind on whether the US will withdraw from the Paris Climate Change Agreement. He's been teasing us a bit today with a tweet. I'll be announcing my decision on the Paris Accord over the next few days. Make America great again. Well, make of that what you will. Is the US ready to walk out of the deal, and what difference would it make to the planet if it did? Paul Bodnar served as climate change advisor to President Obama and helped negotiate the Paris Agreement. He joins us over the internet from Boulder, Colorado. Bjorn Lomborg ran the Danish government's Environmental Assessment Institute, wrote The Skeptical Environmentalist, and has reservations about the agreement. He's in Washington. Evening to you both. Bjorn Lomborg first. I mean, good riddance to Paris? Would that be your take on it?
Well, look, fundamentally we know that even if everyone did everything they promised in Paris, which of course is not going to happen because Trump has already announced that he's not going to do the Clean Power plan, but even if everyone did it, it would only get us 1% of the way of what politicians have promised us. So it was already a very expensive treaty that would do almost no good. So the whole conversation that we're having right now, is Trump going to leave or not, is not going to make much difference. It's just a difference between ineffective treaty and very ineffective treaty. But it does offer us an opportunity to start talking about, is there a smarter way forward? And the short answer is, yes, there is a much better way to actually try to help fix climate instead of going down this basically block road Paris.
Let me put to Paul Bodnar, it is true, isn't it? Paris is not the saving of the planet, is it?
Paris is necessary but not sufficient. You know, it comes at the end of 25 years of trial and error at the international plane to try to come up with a framework for nations to ratchet down their greenhouse gas emissions. And it's a long-term framework. The pledges that were made only go to 2030. They will be followed by other pledges for the future. And already the 2030 pledges will bend down the estimated global emissions curve such that planetary warming is significantly less. So it's a foundation to build on. It's not sufficient, but it's the best hope we've got.
And Paul Bodnar, just what do you think the rest of the world should do now? I mean, if America leaves, should they play hardball? Should they have sanctions against American goods that are made in industries that don't face the same environmental constraints that our industries do? How do you think they should play it?
Well, the rest of the world has made quite clear that they intend to carry on. One of the changes that happened over the last 15 years or so since Kyoto and Copenhagen is that countries have realized that making this transition to a clean energy economy is in their economic interest. And so if you look at the size of the global clean energy market for goods and services, which is already about $1.5 trillion and growing rapidly, it's a huge economic opportunity for Chinese firms, for European firms, and I think they will be only too happy to pick up the slack from the United States in that regard. It's rather sad for our exporters and our businesses, however.
Bjorn Lomborg, I saw you scoffing as Paul was saying all of that. I mean,
and I'm sorry, we just got to get back to reality. Look, the point is, right now, the International Energy Agency tells us that we're spending more than $150 billion every year to subsidize this green economy that Paul is telling us is already effective. No, it only works because we're putting lots and lots of money into it. And then we got to ask, are we getting much climate benefit out of it? And the answer is no. Over the next 25 years, the International Energy Agency estimate we will be spending about $3 trillion just in subsidizing inefficient solar and wind.
Right.
And by the end of that time, we will have a tiny fraction, less than 3%.
Bjorn Lomborg, if we believe what Paul is saying, it's not going to make much difference, the Americans leaving. The rest of the world will carry on with this, and that is the fact. You're not going to get rid of it just by letting the second biggest emitter in the world leave it.
Well, there's a couple of things we need to realize. One is, if we see a long-term treaty already stumble at the very first beginning when the US leaves, but also we have a situation where many developing countries have signed up basically because they were promised $100 billion per year starting in 2020. There's no chance in hell that that's ever going to happen. And so they are also going to start considering, do we want expensive, inefficient green technology, or do we want the cheap fossil fuel economy? And so what we really need to understand is we are doing a repeat of the Kyoto Treaty. If you remember back in the 1990s, Everybody told us Kyoto was the solution. We knew already back then it wasn't, but we wasted 15 years. I worry that we're going to do the same thing with Paris.
Paul, do you think the US, if it does leave now, will ever find itself wanting to come back into this thing?
Well, first let me say that you've heard a lot of incorrect alternative facts from Bjorn Lomborg, in particular about the cost of clean energy, which is now cheaper than most fossil energy in a lot of parts of the world, and in most parts of the United States. I think it will be very hard for the US to claw itself back from a second departure from the international stage on climate change. And most of the costs of withdrawing will fall on the United States in the form of avoided market opportunities. But also, we are the second largest emitter in the world. Our emissions matter. If we stall out instead of continuing to aggressively reduce emissions, the biggest impact of all will be on the poorest and most vulnerable in the world. And that's why you hear a unanimous chorus from those countries urging the Trump administration to stay in the agreement.
Paul Bodnar, Bjorn Lomborg, thank you. We need to leave it there.